Welcome to Writers Talk. Today, we're going to be talking with Anthony Ehlers about how to write a novel in a year. I know that's something we've addressed before, but Anthony is the person who wrote the book on how to write a novel in a year, quite literally. And you can get it on the Writers Write website. And he's going to talk to us about his experience writing that book and writing a book at the same time in the time frame of 1 year. So I'd like to welcome Anthony to the podcast. Anthony, how are you?
Thanks, Chris. No, I'm good. Good.
That's
Looking
good to
forward
hear.
to the talk.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Anthony. What do you do?
So, Chris, my day job is as a copywriter. So I work for a bank and I'm a copywriter and content editor. And then I have been a facilitator of creative writing courses for Writers Write, believe it or not, for over 10 years. So I only stopped.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
So I only stopped that when COVID kicked in, and I must say I miss it a lot. Yeah, and yes, part-time writing, obviously the blogs and stuff I do for Writers Write is, my passion is of course for craft and writing craft. So for teaching and, explaining the craft of writing, that's my primary passion. So I really love teaching. But I have published, a novel and written quite a few short stories and done some screenplays for television. So a little bit all over the place in terms of where I've published and what sort of work I've done. And it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony has written extensively on the Writers Write website, and we'll put a link to his profile below for everyone who is interested in finding out about that.
That's what was so nice about teaching, is that as you engage with writers and delegates, you pick up what people want to know, what people are struggling with. But how Write Your Novel in a Year came about was I was actually working as a copywriter, and one of my colleagues, she wanted to write, and so we started this small writing group on the terrace at work, once or twice a week. And so I really did it to support her. And I thought it would be a great way for me to also, get myself marshaled and to start writing again. Yeah, so that's kind of how it came about in as a simple way as that. Like I really just wanted to help her. And she did go on to write her book. And I finished this book as well. So that was great.
So just to clarify on the format of that booklet. Well, it's actually a proper book in itself. It's one of the longest workbooks we have, but it's 52 weeks. One sort of I wouldn't call it exercise or anything, but one bit of advice or a bit of a diary entry every week.
Yes. So the format was quite interesting, is that I wanted to give a little bit of theory and a little bit of my experience of writing for that week. And then often I would, talk about some exercises that you could try, or like some quick hacks that you could use. And I always try to finish with like inspirational quotes. So yeah, it was quite challenging writing the blog and working on the book at the same time. And
I mean, some of the blog posts are more than 1,000 words in length. So
I know, it was.
Have to do that and then contend with writing a chapter every week is quite something.
It was one of my more ambitious projects for the year. And it was kind of a difficult year, that I will be honest with you.
Oh, what year was it, Anthony?
I think it was 2016.
2016, right.
2015 or 2016.
Sure. And you were working for the bank then? Or
No, I was working for a tech company.
Right.
I was working in their creative department.
As a copywriter.
Yeah, as a copywriter, and it was a very pressurized job.
And then on top of that, I mean, as you say, you were facilitating for us and writing this weekly
Yeah.
update on a book and then writing a book yourself. And you said you're supporting someone else who was writing her book that year. That
Yeah.
must that must have been a very difficult. Must be difficult to
It
find
was
time in the day.
fun. Yeah, it was fun. It was challenging, but it was fun. Look, Chantal never asked me to read her book every week. She would just, follow the blog, and she went and, finished her book on her own. And the reason, part of the reason I wrote this blog, Write Your Novel in a Year, was particularly for people like myself and my colleague Chantal and other people who are writing, is that most writers have full-time jobs, and we
Yes,
have side
absolutely.
hustles, and we're doing a million other things. Um, and it would be great if you could be a full-time writer and you could get your novel out in a month or so. And I remember some of the blog posts from Write Your Novel in a Year were shared on other platforms. And some of the comments back were like, oh, why would you want to spend a year writing a book? 6 months should be the minimum, or,
Or maximum, yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So what I wanted to just clarify is that you could read all of these blog posts in a week and, start writing your novel and finish it in 2 months, 3 months, whatever time you've given yourself. It's not that prescriptive that you can only work on your novel on certain things in that time frame. But I think for people who are time starved and time poor, then this might be, quite a good framework. And
Yes.
the idea came from Amanda in Writer's Right, when we always tell people, a page a day. If you write
Makes
just one page of your novel a day, you'll have a novel at the end of the year. So I think that was probably also in the back of my mind when I started doing this. And often I would put like time locks in the exercises or in the blogs, because the one thing that I did find was very effective is when we do the writing courses, is if you give people a time lock, 10 minutes, half an hour, they will produce something. It's when you have endless time to procrastinate and to think of other things that you will never get anything down on paper. So yeah, I thought a year was a fairly decent amount of time to write the book.
No, it's interesting you say. I mean, a page a day is very achievable for everyone, right? Even if that's
Absolutely,
all.
no matter how busy you are.
If you think about that, what's that, like 400 words, less than 400 words probably? Yeah, double spaced and centered
Yeah,
on that.
I worked it out to about just under 400. So I think, the main thing is to be consistent in that, if you, rather than write a smaller amount every day, than, going to these spasmodic, rushed, panic things to try and meet deadlines, which of course we all do sometimes. But writing 100, 200 words a day is a lot more manageable and a lot more focused way of doing it. Having said that, that's not often how it works, because sometimes the planning of the book or the plotting of the book will take up more time. And when you hit a rhythm, you will find yourself producing maybe over a weekend 10,000 words.
Right.
Um,
Yes. Yeah.
so yeah, that's the one thing I would guard against telling people, doing it this way or being too prescriptive, is you have to find something that works for you. And every writer's process is going to be so different. Um,
Well, I mean,
yeah, so
what I like about your idea there with just the doing a little bit every day, every week or something like that is you start to build up that habit of writing, right?
yeah,
You're writing a blog, and you were writing a book, and you were
mm,
writing um, whatever else you were writing at the time for work,
yeah,
and it kind of creeps into your life at that point, to the point where it's just part of your daily habit. It's something you do before you relax, right? That's just sort of part of your workflow of that time.
yeah. And I think the way I kind of got into writing every day was through, well, mostly through Writers' Rights, because we give those limited time exercises in class, and very often I would join in just to keep the momentum going, and also just to show people that you could do it. But I mean, for the last, sure, it must be also about the last 7 years, I've been doing morning pages, which is the Julia Cameron Artist's Way, approach. And Natalie Goldberg also talks about timed writing in her books. And those two writers are kind of my mentors when it comes to writing and teaching writing.
What is that? Sorry, I'm not familiar.
Oh, so The Artist's Way it's a very iconic book on creativity and especially recovering your creativity if you've lost that spark. And part of the process is what they call morning pages, or what Julia Cameron calls morning pages, where you sit down every morning and you write like 3 or 4 foolscap pages. And it's kind of like a mind dump, and you just get everything on the page, what's worrying you, any weird dreams you had. And yeah, you just learned that you can actually write 4 pages in 30 minutes, Yeah, so it teaches you that you can't wait for the muse to show up. You actually just show up at the page at a certain time and something will flow. Mostly it's a whole lot of crap at the beginning, but even if you wrote a whole lot of crap for 10, 30 minutes, trust me, like 10, you might get one serviceable sentence out of that, or a great idea or something. It never fails to produce something. This morning I wrote something, and it was really nothing. Nothing came out of it, but that's fine. It's discipline, it's absolutely discipline.
Yeah, and doing that disciplined writing every day is just going to improve your writing overall. Yes. I mean, you might not notice it every day, but over time, you'll look back at your earlier stuff and it'll look like garbage compared to what you're writing. Yeah. But what I found most interesting about your process was you could see the development of your novel over the course of those 52 weeks. And, in your blog post, you'd mention some characters and you'd mention what they were doing and the original intentions and things like that. But I was wondering how you structured the actual writing of the book yourself. I mean, did you adhere to everything you'd said? Or did you plan that out in advance, or did you just sort of go at it?
I did. And I'll share something with you. I did work on the synopsis a lot and the planning of the book a lot. And in retrospect, I probably think I overdid it.
How so?
And in that, the structure was too rigid. And that's a lesson that I think I could take out of the process, is that you can sort of over-engineer your book until all the excitement and any elbow room is gone. Some of the feedback I got from editors and people who looked at the book afterwards was exactly that. So I think having some framework and some structure in place is a great idea. And I don't think you can write a book without planning it to some degree. But when I look back now, I can see that, and maybe it was because I had that mindset of that I wanted to create this work, this blog post series, that was in my mind, and that's why I wanted to get it like completely right. So the structure was always there, and I did follow a very sort of classic structure, 3-act structure, having a strong midpoint, and I do talk about that extensively in the book.
Right.
I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but the structure was there, and the structure did help, but in some cases it actually was a little bit of
I just find that's so interesting. So what did you overplan? Or what made it, I suppose, too formulaic? Was that the criticism, or?
No, I think, and maybe if I can just go back a step here,
sure.
And is that when you have an idea for a story, and I remember discussing my ideas for the story, or okay, let me go back one more step. Before I started on this journey to write the 52, the series, is that I did chat to Amanda and I said, I want to do this, and I really do want to produce a novel during the course of the year. And I had these 4 ideas, and I still asked, which idea should I pursue? And she said, no, well, choose the one that's going to speak to you the most. And this story definitely did speak to me the most. And my point is that as a writer, you have an instinct for a story, and you might even be seeing that story, that novel might even be playing out in your mind, and you need to trust that instinct. So if I had to do it differently now, I would have spent maybe like a couple of weekends just writing out everything I that was coming into my mind about the book. Almost like a very long synopsis or a very short first draft, if you will. And I think sometimes when you start over planning and over criticizing yourself as you're going along, that's where you don't trust your instinct. So as much as planning and having, guardrails as you go along in the journey are great, I think you must never ignore that instinct for story, because as storytellers, I think it's very natural. And yeah, maybe if I had followed that a little bit, trusted myself a little bit more in the beginning, it would have.
So I have a similar experience where
Okay.
I wrote a book over the course of like 4 or 5 months, something like that, and I try to do it every sort of day at a certain time, and then I followed a couple of some good advice, but I ended up having counterpoints for characters just because I had a certain archetype of character. And so I sort of ended up with a kind of like a perfect mess. It didn't really make sense that this character existed for the story, but it made theoretical sense that this person had a counterpoint, and that I introduced these two people at this time, even though I felt that when I reread the draft, it didn't really make a particularly like good sense from a flow perspective.
Okay.
Did you have any of those sort of problems?
I did. So some of the challenges that I had, and again, this is why I say sometimes you should just allow your story to, develop as naturally as possible. What I did struggle with, is those turning points. So what was the first turning point going to be? What was that major culmination in the middle was going to be? I always knew what the ending was going to be. And perhaps that was a fault as well. So I knew that I wanted it to end on a very high note, and that's why I even made the physical setting very high, and the emotions running high, and there was going to be a strong element of danger. So I always knew where I wanted to go with the story, and I always kind of knew and what the twist at the end was going to be, like a slight reversal at the end. So the first turning point and the culmination, whoa, it brought me to my knees. Yeah, that was stuff where I really wanted to abandon the story, where I did abandon the story for a couple of weeks, and I really, really struggled with it. But what's interesting, Chris, is now that the story lay fallow for a while, because I didn't manage to find an agent or a publisher for it, and I really didn't want to go the self-publishing route, purely out of laziness.
I'd also just suggest to anyone who's listening to this that, and unless you really have some money to burn, don't do that. Most people I know who've done that have not found particularly good success.
Yeah, and obviously getting feedback from readers and trusted readers and friends who are also writers. Now that the book lay fallow for a while, when I'm editing it now, it's just going so much easier. Okay, Chris, it's like I can absolutely see the problem with the antagonist that everyone was pointing out, that I just had a blind spot to. And now that I'm not that passionate about it, now that I have a little bit of that distance, I've changed his character slightly.
Yes,
and it's just working a lot better. And that's something that I've learned, like after writing for God knows how long, is that sometimes you don't have to rewrite everything. You don't have to make these major changes. Sometimes a little tweak, or just being a little bit more flexible and taking on a little bit of criticism, can absolutely help you improve a character. So I don't know how you fixed your flow in your story, or how did you?
I put it on a shelf. I haven't looked at it in a year. That's how I fixed it.
Yeah, but yeah, sometimes it does. It's not as bad as you think it was. So yeah, that's the one thing that I found now when I'm editing it again. Is the first thing is that the antagonist didn't need that much work, but he did need some work. The second thing that I found out is that I was over explaining some of the psychology of this. So yeah, by cutting away a lot of the, explaining what's going on in their heads wasn't completely necessary. But yeah, the characters have always stayed with me, and it's a story that I really love. So it's not something that I wanted to abandon completely. So maybe that's also a lesson that we learn, is that sometimes you have to put something away in a drawer for a year or so, and then when you take it out, it's going to be,
Yeah.
you know,
I
so you
think
could
I,
write it, yeah, but maybe
yeah.
don't publish it in the same year is my lesson, or try and find a publisher straight away. Yeah,
I think that is like, I mean, if you're a full-time writer and you do have like 3 months just to write a story, most of them don't actually publish that story in that year. You know, if I, if I,
well,
if I, if
yeah,
I mean, some do obviously. I mean,
some do, yeah,
if I look at like Stephen King or Terry Pratchett or some people who were very prolific, they'd write the
yeah,
novel and then they'd probably just move on to writing the next novel. And then they'd
yeah,
come back and edit that maybe like
that's
six
bring it
months
back, yeah,
later, send it to some editors and have some feedback and that sort of thing. So
yeah.
I think if, you know, what you did as a person with slightly less time than a full-time writer, I mean, it makes sense, right? You've done
Mm.
your first draft in that time, and then you need some time for it to percolate and you need to understand what might be changed for the better.
Absolutely.
Anthony, if you could tell me what kind of book is it? Just
So it's, yeah, so the book is about the genesis, or the idea of the story came about, is that if you watch movies like Fatal Attraction and that kind of thing, it's always somebody who's one person who's being stalked, and they're obviously trying to overcome the stalker's attention and trying to keep their affair that they had away from their partner, whether it's wife or husband. So in my story, what's different is that it's a couple who gets stalked. So they have this encounter with a young man, and they think it's a once-off thing, and it's very erotic and exciting, but he's not able to let go, and he starts stalking both of them. So as soon as his attention becomes dangerous and dark, it's putting all this pressure on their relationship, and their marriage and their relationship is really going to be tested, to breaking point. And it's what they learn about themselves and their relationship, that is the truth that will come out of the story. So the idea of this story like that came fully formed into my mind. So that always was a very strong impetus for writing the story. And it's still very much that kind of story even now when I'm editing it now.
so yeah,
So it's a psychological erotic thriller, if you
right,
had to
right.
put it in a nutshell.
So I
Yeah,
mean, you were hit with this idea for this thriller, just sort of out of the blue, and it came to you like
yeah,
as a complete concept. But then
yeah,
you needed to sit down and divide it up into bits and pieces to form
yeah,
it into the novel.
absolutely.
And you
Yeah.
decided on a three-act structure, similar to like what you'd see in a film.
Yes. So,
Right.
and this is maybe a lesson that I also learned, is obviously because part of me wanted to pay homage to these movies that I really enjoyed. So, movies like Fatal Attraction, Play Misty for me, those, and I wanted to sort of slightly reference them
Right.
in the story, but then also subvert some of the stereotypes that we see in these kind of stalker storylines. And to me, maybe that was a slight problem now when I look at it now, is that your story can follow any structure you want, or it can take you into a place where things might work out slightly differently. So the physical danger for me is quite easy to write, and I'm sure maybe other writers will agree with me here. But to get that psychology of right, and to understand why their relationship was vulnerable in the first place to this kind of thing, and to understand the stalker's psychology was also very very important to get under the skin of the characters. So my two main characters, Jenna and Matt, were always they also sort of came fully formed into my imagination. The antagonist was always a problem.
Right.
And I think most of us do struggle with the antagonist, but he's behaving at the moment, so I'm quite, well, not he's misbehaving, but he's more under my control, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think that is a problem for every writer, is that the character has to sort of live in your brain, and so you have to give it enough space for it to be a real being, right?
Yes.
If you understand what I'm trying to get at. So the danger is if you're writing a lot of characters, a lot of them just end up being the same person
Yeah,
as your standard image
yeah.
of something. So yeah, getting them to be opposed or creating an interesting antagonist is always difficult. I think that's why
Yeah,
you
I
see
always,
a lot of books that the antagonist and the hero are just sort of mirrors of each other, because that's the
yeah.
simplest way of going about it, isn't it?
Sometimes we come up with this kind of neat pop psychology as to why they behave the way they do, which is fine. I mean, in a to get you thinking about that type of character is fine, but they eventually must become real flesh and blood, you know, living, breathing characters on the page. Um, and with my antagonist, the problem, and I only saw this like I said after I put the book away, was that he was far too passive and weak, which can
Right.
create that kind of craven, rejected stalker, archetype. But now, when he's a more confident, and he's actually the catalyst and the what's the word I'm looking for? He's the one who sets the plot in motion. I've given him a lot more power, and I think that works much better in the storyline now. So yeah, so
I
antagonists,
mean, that's yeah.
yeah, are tricky things. They need to be wily, but they also need to be quite powerful in their own way. And they don't have to be completely bad, if that makes
Right.
sense. They
No,
just
no. I
have to,
mean,
yeah.
no one's completely evil.
Yeah. And I
I
didn't
mean, that
want
doesn't
him
mean
to
you
be
can't
like
can't write a comically evil character. It just needs to make
yeah,
sense for them to be that way, I suppose.
yeah. I didn't want him to be like a male version of Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction either, kind of thing.
Right. Um.
So what happened? Yeah, what
Yeah.
was really helpful for me, and I think this is something when it comes to visual storytelling, is that I did see the story very visually in my mind, and some of it, would have worked just as well in a screenplay as well. But
Do
yeah,
you
I
think?
think
Sorry, just a thought I have is a lot of writers think they must write a book, but really they a lot of them are more interested in writing a movie.
especially today, there's some truth in that. Is because everyone is hoping for their story to be picked up by Netflix or by some competition or something like that. But yeah, I think the story could have worked well as a screenplay as well. But what really was interesting is that when I was redoing the book now, re-editing it, I did do the outline again almost as a screenplay, and that worked really well, because it allows me not to become too static in the scenes and not to over explain, put too much in the narrative that has to over explain what's happening in the characters' minds and with the emotions. So
And that
yeah,
probably
that
works
helped.
really well for a thriller, having a
Yeah,
little bit of the unknown. Uh,
yes, yeah. So I
but
think, yeah, that's, yeah.
sorry, to change the
Sorry.
subject a little bit, I wanted to ask you, did you approach any publishers or anything like that after?
I actually had a few contacts with agents,
Right.
and they did give me some really good feedback, which of course took me forever to get to the rewrites. um, yeah, no, I never sent it directly to any publisher.
Okay.
And probably the reason for that, Chris, if I'm very honest, is that probably in the back of my mind, I knew there was some knock in the engines still, yeah, in terms of the plot and in terms of the antagonist. If that's one thing I can share with writers, is that if you're not happy with the book, and I know that we'll never completely be happy with our books and we have to let them go out in the world and get that feedback. Yeah, if you're not happy with the story, then that's an alert. That's a signal for you to maybe go back and look at it again.
Yes.
And for me, maybe it's a controversial statement, is that I think that sometimes what self-publishing, you could write the book today and publish it tonight at midnight with a few clicks on Amazon or whatever. And once it's out there, that's the version that you're sharing with the world. So I
Yeah.
think that's absolutely important to let your book, lie down and let the dust settle so you can start seeing where the cracks are, where you can make improvements. And that's where agents and editors and writing mentors and coaches can absolutely help you make your book stronger. so that when you do self-publish and you do put it out there, that it's the best version of that story you can find, you know. And that's just a personal bugbear for me. But
But
yeah, so
no, I mean, it would have benefited so many self-published, even famous self-published authors to have gone through
yeah,
that process. I mean, wouldn't it? I
yeah.
mean, Twilight could have been a much better version of itself had that been the case. Surely it would have.
Yeah, look, and I'm not saying every book out there needs to be perfect, but I think you need to be. So if I had to now go and self-publish this book, I would probably be a lot more confident about the story and a lot more happy with the story because
Right.
of the changes I've made. Yeah.
I
Yeah. So
mean,
I think writing your novel in a year is one thing, but the editing process could take, I don't say, I'm not advocating you should take as long as I have, but I let it lie, I think, for at least 8 weeks before you even pick up a pen again. You know, and get some people you really trust to read it, give you feedback. But
yeah,
again, then
and
you might not be in the right frame of mind to take that feedback on, because people were telling me early on about the antagonist, but I had this idea about him and I wasn't flexible enough to change, you know. So yeah, sometimes you have to, you know, you have as an author have to be ready to make those changes.
recently, I mean, over the last year and a half, I've been doing several sort of writing related exercises, and I've been looking at really good advice and trying to work my way through it. And I found that I've come to all the conclusions that these very experienced writers have said, but I had to make all the mistakes
Yes,
to get to
exactly,
that point. And there was just
exactly.
nothing I could have done to expedite that process besides
Yeah,
just churning out words
yeah.
and
No, you're
then
absolutely
looking at
right.
them again.
And even if when you've learned those lessons, you know, a few times, you will still make the mistakes again, you know. And I think that's kind of the one of the curses of being a writer is that some days you'll get back, you know, just about every day I get to my desk and you know I can't write even one sentence and I'm making like really rookie mistakes and I'm like, how have you earned your living from writing for the last 20 years when you can't write, you know? But
Right.
it's like you say, you just have to. I think, you know, I was watching this I think it was an interview with Ed Sheeran, and he was saying, like, you know, creativity is like opening an old tap. You know, you have to let that rusty water run out and, you know, until the clear water comes, and then you start getting ideas. And it's just practice and just showing up, you know. So yeah, I mean, when I looked at this book, when I took it out to edit it again, I like saw all the clumsy places. But equally, I saw the places where I did really enjoy the writing, and some of it I thought was really strong. But yeah, you have to make those mistakes for yourself, exactly like you're saying, Chris.
Did you ever have the impression that you were just copying another author's style when you were writing?
No,
No.
no, I didn't feel that because the style of the writing came to me quite naturally. What I did fear was because the emphasis for the story was this kind of fatal attraction, plain misty for me, stalker kind of archetype. I did worry that my plot was going to be stereotypical.
Right.
Um, and while I don't think it was, when I, you know, because I'll be very honest with you, I love these kind of trashy Lifetime movies about stalkers and that kind of thing. It's kind of like,
Why not? Why not?
you know, my go-to kind of thing. I did see that, ooh, yeah, you did use quite a few of those cliches, Anthony. So I definitely weeded out some of that stuff now when I was editing again. Yeah, so I did worry that my plot. So I think you can, so there's 2 points I want to make here is that I think if I wanted to go in terms of that, you know, paying homage to those kind of movies and books, the plot could have gone one way and it could have absolutely been like, Fatal Attraction 2.0 or Fatal Attraction for the millennial or for, you know, but yeah, the more the characters became real to me and the more I wanted to expose another truth in the story changed a lot. So for me, the theme of the story became more important than the structure and the plot, because I'll be honest, plot sometimes is my Achilles heel. And so I will try and update a classic kind of story like or take a story that's already been told and try and tell it in a different way. But what was really nice now when I came back to this novel is that I saw my own honest story coming out of it. So the story is very around, jealousy and trust, and how we define our own relationships. So to me,
if just interrupt. The way I'm understanding what you're saying is initially you sort of created this stereotypical, typical kind of thriller, right?
Yes,
and then when you were re-editing it sort of at that point it became your personal version of that story with your own like personality infused into it, and it became its own new thing.
Yeah, and it became a lot more clearer and authentic.
Yeah, authentic. And different and interesting, I assume, right?
Yeah, and interesting for me now because I now understood what I wanted to get out of the story.
But do you think you needed to set down that core of the story for that to be possible?
No, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the most interesting things is you always, as a writer, I think you can learn as much craft as you can. And you absolutely must, but you will always find out what your strengths. So in this story, the characters were definitely my strongest point. And funny enough, the blog posts that spoke to character were the most, they had the highest engagement on the site, which up in the second, well, actually it's not in the, it's probably the fourth draft now that I'm busy with, Chris, which is fine. The fourth draft is, I'm trusting my instinct and I'm trusting my characters, and the story is just much, much better. And the plot is even much better.
And I think there's nothing wrong with taking your time. Some of the best books ever written have taken decades to be published. I mean, it's not to say one should aspire to that, obviously.
No, I don't think you should aspire to that at all. But I think when you get to your story and the story that's yours and the story that feels the most authentic for you to tell, then that's probably going to give you as the writer the most satisfaction, and that's what I'm finding.
I just want to compare this, right? So I mean, obviously, Tolkien famously took like 15 years to write his book, right? And he created languages and created worlds and backgrounds and various stuff he never intended to show anyone. Oliver, and another contributor and my co-host on the show, has to deal with a lot of people who believe that they're the new incarnation of Tolkien. And so he deals with a lot of scripts that he gets and a lot of manuscripts that he has to appraise. Okay, it's great. This person's created their own language. They've drawn this map. They've made new like races of people and all these sort of things. But they didn't actually create a story.
Yeah.
And I think what you sort of done is maybe like you've gone the opposite way around, right? So you get that sort of person who's gone into all this detail of making some interesting kind of history, alternative history, but with no plot. And you've gone and you've made this like perfect plot. And now you're in the process of just adding in those details as necessary. And I think that's the smarter way of going about it. If I'm honest, is having a story and then personalizing it the way you want to. I don't know if you think, you have any opinion on that?
I think, how you, and that's what I'm saying, that's the writing is such a mysterious, weird kind of process. However you come to that story is, you just have to, like you say, like fumble your way, hack your way, rewrite your way to whatever story is going to work for you and that you're going to be proud of and that feels like it's, completely your story. But just to go back, like I always told, delegates and writers is that don't ever try and write like Hemingway because only Hemingway can write like Hemingway. But I think maybe we should add Tolkien to that list as well.
For sure.
But the other thing that was interesting for me is that I would share with whoever's listening is that you often don't need as much plot as you think you do.
Right.
So because I know that plot is my weak point, I try to put too much plot in the story. And I thought, my God, these people are not going to be bored in this story. They're going to be turning the page to find out what happens. And that sometimes is a mistake as well. Sometimes you don't need as much plot as you think you do. If
Sometimes
you
you
have a
just
really,
need space for the
yeah,
characters to just be themselves, right?
I'm not saying you don't need a plot, but I'm saying if you have a strong idea and a strong theme, the plot will kind of work itself out as well. You know, there's some great scenes. There's a whole character that I had to lose in the story now because she was just overcomplicating the story, and I really didn't need her, and I really liked this character, and she produced a lot of twists in the story, and it was very hard for me to let her go. But she doesn't work for the story anymore. So the story, that's what I'm saying. The more you simplify, the stronger your story will be as well. So this character was a subplot that was going to eventually, meet up with the main storyline. And when I'm redoing the story now, is the story completely only focuses on the triangle between the couple and the stalker, and the story is just so much better for it. So limiting your characters or the part that even sub characters will play is, I found in this instance, a really good idea, and simplifying the plot really made the plot stronger, which is bizarre, which I would have not thought when I was writing this blog series in a year.
That's, I mean, there's instances like the Sherlock Holmes books sort of stand out as like a plot-driven kind of device.
Yes.
I mean, they have excessive amounts of it, and it's convoluted, but
even Agatha Christie,
Agatha Christie, like I don't know.
And James Patterson still does it, and they work really well in certain genres. Maybe is what we're saying here, Chris.
Yeah, but it has to be done in a way that the book has to be charismatic enough to contain that. It only works in Sherlock Holmes because you want to hear him explain how he's figured out this convoluted plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in detective novels as well, obviously, that's part of the charm of it is figuring out. But if you're going for something, more streamlined, more pointed, like a thriller, maybe you do need to slim down that. Or if you're just going for a simple hero's journey sort of thing, then a simple plot is the way to go. And then just having interesting characters going through that simple plot is the best and most enjoyable thing for your reader.
And I think even if you have a simple plot, that doesn't mean that the plot is without tension and a lot of tension and a lot of suspense for the reader, because you build it up better rather than, but when I focused on the characters and the tensions between them, the scenes actually became a little bit longer, but the tension was absolutely in those scenes. So to me, that worked better than trying to have, the antagonist trying to kill them 3 times in one chapter. It's like, no, why is he even doing that, So I think interrogating your character's intentions is also a great way, to make sure your plot's going to work and that your characters are the right characters for that story.
Yeah, it sort of strikes me. There's, the Marvel movies, obviously the best known franchise in the world at the moment. But there's a trilogy in there, the Thor Trilogy, which the first 2 movies have perfect symmetrical plots. And they're the 2 least well received of the movies.
Really?
But they're perfect. They have like a little hero's journey in each of them, and have the hero and the heroine, and the mirrored bad guy, the father. And they're perfect, really. Like they're perfectly structured movies. And a lot of people find them quite boring in that way. And then you got this crazy New Zealand guy called Taika Waititi coming in to direct the 3rd one, and sort of flip the entire serious dark tone of that into this weird wacky comedy, which he's very well known for. He did What We Do in the Shadows, that vampire comedy skit, and he just introduced nonsense to this existing world, right? And it completely changed the way people felt about that character, the tone of the thing, and it was so much more enjoyable to a lot of people. And I kind of think that is maybe how you should view what you're doing as an author. While you should create that perfect plot, it's also okay to take a hammer at the end of it and just chisel down the bits that don't fit or completely shatter
Mm.
some sort of contrived or cliched sequence into something that is engaging and interesting. And maybe that should be your goal. If you are not having fun with it at that point, why would the reader enjoy
Absolutely.
what they're reading at that point? If you're not crying while you're writing something sad, that no one's going to feel that sadness. If it's not actually clever to you, no one else will feel that way. And I think it's really
Yeah.
powerful to remember that so many
Yes,
other
it's
people in the world are you, right? Have your
Yeah.
basic tastes and preferences. So if you're writing something that you'd enjoy reading, you're going to have an audience for it.
Yeah. No, I agree. Absolutely. So, yeah, like a couple of things there is sometimes you'll read a book or like you say, watch a movie that doesn't follow any sort of proper structure. It maybe it's not even the best movie or book you've read, but you can absolutely sense that the writer or the creators had so much fun making it that you carried it along, with it. And you absolutely enjoy it because it's almost like you feel that energy come off the page. The other thing is that exactly like you say, sometimes things are too perfect. So, you take a hammer to it and you can either shatter the whole thing and whatever remains you pick up and build something else out of it. But like I said earlier, is that sometimes you don't have to make massive changes. Sometimes it's a matter of taking stuff out, a matter of just tweaking something or seeing a character in a different light that's going to absolutely, improve the story. But my other thing is that, and I know it's hard, I know it's very hard, but if, like if after I write this new draft and the book still doesn't, make me happy or find a home or publisher, then you need to seriously think, is it worth more energy and effort into it? Sometimes you have to move on to another story.
Yes, yeah.
So obviously in the interim, I've written lots of other stuff,
I mean,
but I can't,
not
yeah,
everything is the Mona Lisa, right? It's
yeah,
a
not
project
everything
that
is,
takes 20 years might not work out.
yeah,
And
and
at some point you
everything's
just
an
have to
experiment.
let it go.
And sometimes an experiment will fail, and that's also fine. You don't want it to, but sometimes, yeah, it doesn't work out quite the way you planned.
Well, Anthony, hopefully today's experiment with me and you has not failed, and I hope people have enjoyed listening to us. But
No, definitely.
where can people find you online, Anthony?
So mostly on Writers Right, .co.za. I don't really publish any writing advice anywhere else. And yeah, I have only been producing blogs and workbooks a little bit sporadically in the last year. But my back catalogue is quite extensive. So, like I said, yeah, my passion is craft. So most of my blog posts focus purely on craft, on how to create characters, setting, dialogue, that sort of thing. And as you said, the workbook of Write Your Novel in a Year is available.
And your wonderful visual storytelling workbook as well.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you're more
So
interested in
that's
screenplays.
sort of more aimed at screenwriters, but I think any kind of creative person or any writer will benefit from that as well.
Well,
Platform.
thank you so much for being here, Anthony. This
No,
has been
great.
Writers Talk. My name is
Yeah,
Christopher Dean. You can find me at Christopher Dean at Twitter and on writersright.co.za. Thanks so much for being here. Goodbye to everyone.